Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone. Thank you everyone for joining in. Let's start with Krishna book. So I would start reading. Yeah. Uh, just one thing, if anyone wants to read, please unmute yourself and just say Hare Krishna, or I would be getting into reading, so I would not be remembering any other thing. Okay, continuing. Chapter 87, and this is the fourth class, I believe, for chapter 87. The personified Vedas were glorifying Krishna all through this while, and now personified Vedas are continuing their glorification of Krishna. Actually, the objective of everyone is to develop love for God. The objective of human form of life is to develop love for God. Now, uh, until we glorify Lord, we would not develop love for God. You must be thinking, sometimes I say, until we surrender, we would not develop love for God. Until we do our prescribed duty, we would not develop love for God. Now today I'm saying, until we glorify Lord, we would not develop love for God. Yeah. Okay, so here's the catch. So unless we glorify Lord, would we surrendering to Him? Would we surrender to anyone whom we do not want to glorify? So that's the reason why we need to glorify, and by glorification, surrenderance would come. Unless we surrender, we would not develop love for God. And to develop that surrendered attitude, we need to surrender onto our Guru. Unless we surrender to Guru, the process is not followed. The Guru Shishya Parampara is not followed. And again, we would not develop love for God. Right? So all these are intricate paths, connected paths for developing the same common goal. Continuing, the personified Vedas therefore concluded, O Lord, you are unlimited, eternal, Dhruva, and the living entities are limited, eternal. Right? We too are eternal. Krishna too is eternal. We are limited. Krishna is unlimited. The form of unlimited eternal is sometimes conceived as the universal form, and in the Vedic literature, like the Upanishads, the form of the limited eternal is vividly described. It is said therein that the original spiritual form of the living entity is 1/10,000 the size of the hair of the tip. It is also stated that a spirit of greater than greatest and smaller than the smallest. Uh, The individual living entities who are eternally parts and parcel of God are smaller than the smallest. With our material senses, we can perceive neither the Supreme, who is greater than the greatest, nor the individual soul, who is smaller than the smallest. From the authoritative sources of Vedic literature, we have to understand both him who is greater than the greatest and him who is smaller than the smallest. The Vedic literature states that the super soul is sitting within the heart of every living entity's body and is as big as the thumb. Uh, Therefore, the argument may be put forward that how can something be the size of the thumb be accommodated within the heart of an ant? The answer is that the thumb measurement of the super soul is imagined in proportion to the body of the living entity. In no circumstance, therefore, can a super soul and the individual living entity be taken as one, although both of them enter within the material body of living entity. The super soul lives within the heart to direct or control the individual living entity. Although both the Dhruva or eternal and living entity is always under the direction of the Supreme. It may be argued that because the living entity are born of the material nature, they are all equal and independent. In the Vedic literature, however, it is said that the supreme personality of Godhead impregnates the material nature with the living entities and then they come out. Therefore, the appearance of the individual living entities is not factually done to material nature alone, just as the child produced by the woman is not her independent production. The woman is first impregnated by a man and then a child is produced. As such, the child production by the woman is a part and parcel of man. Similarly, the living entity are apparently produced by the material nature but not independently. It is due to that, due to the impregnation of material nature by the Supreme Father that the living entity are present. Therefore, the argument that the individual living entities are not parts and parcel of Supreme cannot stand. For example, the different parts of the body cannot be taken as equal to the whole. Rather, the whole body is the controller of the different limbs. Similarly, the parts and parcel confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that the living entities are parts and parcel of Krishna. Mamaishva, Mamaish, Mamai Vamsha. Uh, yes. Uh, this is Ansha. Mamai and Amsha, Mamai Vamsha. No sane man, therefore, will accept the theory that the super soul and the individual soul are of the same category. They are equal in quality but not quantitatively. The super soul is always the supreme, and the individual soul always subordinate to the super soul. This is the conclusion of the Vedas. The significant word used in this connection is yan maya, chin maya, yan maya, and chin maya. In Sanskrit grammar, the word mayat is used in the sense of transformation and also in the sense of abundance. The Mayavadi philosophers interpret that the word Yan Maya and Chin Maya indicate that the living entity is always equal to Supreme. But one has to consider whether this affix Mayat is used in abundance or for transformation. Actually, these kind of confusion happen only because of confusion. You know why? Huh? Does anyone has any understanding of why this kind of confusion happens? Some of you might be feeling confusion. Why confusion in the scriptures? Why is it not so simple? Why there is always a confusion? You notice whenever there is very critical point, there is a confusion. Hmm? Whenever there is a very critical point, there holds a confusion. Yeah, Krishna confuses people. Is it? Actually, that is a test of our surrender. So, someone who is understanding things in Guru Shishya Parampara, how would they be understanding? In the form of surrenderance. Once they surrender, they would be understanding what their Guru tells them. Else, they would always have a choice to get deviated. And trust me, there are so many deviations available that unless there is you surrender, unless you hear words of Guru, you would get a different version. And please, majority, maximum people would be talking about the incorrect version only because 999 are on their side. So majority of them would not be doing bhakti. That is a reality. And they would find a reason to get deviated. And we all would get deviated unless we surrender to Guru. Yeah. Mm. Okay. The living entity never possesses anything exactly in the same proportion as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, this mayat affix cannot be used to mean that the individual living entity is quantitatively equal with the Lord. The individual living entity never has to never has complete knowledge. Otherwise, how could he have come under the control of Maya or the material energy? The word abundant can be accepted, therefore, only in proportion to the magnitude of the living entity. The spiritual oneness of the Supreme Lord and the living entities is never to be accepted as homogeneity, means it is not equally distributed. Okay, each and every living entity is individual. If homogeneous oneness is accepted, then the liberation of individual soul and all the individual souls would have to be liberated immediately. But the fact that every individual souls is differently enjoying and suffering in the material world. As mentioned above, the word mayat is also used in the sense of transformation. Sometimes it is used to mean byproduct. The impersonalist theory is that Brahman himself has accepted different types of bodies and uh, that is his leela or pastime. There are, however, many hundreds and thousands of species of life in different standards of uh, living the supreme absolute truth. Then there would not be question of liberation because Brahman would already be liberated. Another interpretation put forth by Mayavadis is that every millennium, different types of bodies are manifest. And when the millennium is closed, all the different bodies or expansion of Brahman automatically becomes one, ending all different manifestation. Then in the next millennium, according to this theory, Brahman again expands in different bodily forms. If we accept this theory, the Brahman became subject to change. But this cannot be accepted from the Vedanta Sutra. Hmm. From the Vedanta Sutra, we have understood that Brahman is by nature joyful. He cannot therefore change himself into a body which is subject to many painful conditions. Actually, the living entity are infinite, infinitesimal. I find it difficult to read. Infinitesimal parts and parcel of Brahman. And as such, they are prone to be covered by the illusionary energy. As explained before, the parts and parcel, the part, the particle of Brahman are like sparks. Yes. So let me mark from here. Okay, you can use it for argument. The particles of Brahman are like sparks blissfully dancing within the fire, but there is a chance of their falling from the fire to smoke, although smoke is another condition of fire. The material world is just like smoke, and the spiritual world is like blazing fire. The innumerable living entities are prone to fall down to the material world from the spiritual world when influenced by the illusionary activity. And it is also possible for the living entity to be liberated again when, by cultivation of real knowledge, he becomes completely free from the contamination of material world. The theory of asuras is that the living entity are born in material nature or prakriti in touch with the purusha. This theory also cannot be accepted because both the material nature and the supreme personality of Godhead are eternally existing. Neither the material nature nor the supreme personality of Godhead can be born. The supreme Lord is known as Aja or unborn. Similarly, the material nature is also called Aja. Both the term Aja and Aja means unborn. One is Aja, another one is Aja. because both the material nature and the supreme Lord are unborn. It is not possible that they can beget the living entity, but it is accepted in the Vedic literature that the water in contact with the air sometimes presents innumerable bubbles. So, a combination of material nature and the supreme person causes the appearance of living entity within this material world. As bubbles in the water appear in different shapes, the living entity also appear in the material world uh, in different shape and conditions influenced by the mode of material nature. Therefore, it is not improper to conclude that the living entity appearing within the material world in different shapes, such as the human being, demigod, animal, birds, and beasts, all get their respective bodies due to different desires. No one can say. Uh, Actually, the sentence should not start with therefore. Okay, let me mark from here to here. The earlier one too could have been used for argue. Therefore, it is not improper to conclude that the living entity appearing within the material world in different shapes, such as the human being, demigod, animal, birds, and beasts, all get their respective bodies due to different desires. No one can say when such desires were awakened in them, and therefore it is called anadi karma. The cause of such material existence is untraceable. No one knows when material life began, but it is a fact that it does not have a point of beginning because originally every living entity is a spiritual spark. As the sparks falling from the ground, from the fire, has a beginning, so a living entity coming to the to this material world has a beginning. No one can say when. Even though during the time of dissolution, all the conditioned living entities remain merged with the supreme existence of the Lord, as if in deep sleep, their original desires to lord it over the material nature do not subside. Yes. Again, when there is a cosmic manifestation, they come out to fulfill the same desires, and therefore they appear. Sorry, therefore, they appear in different species of light. The living entities merged into supreme at the time of dissolution are compared to honey. In a honeycomb, the taste of different flowers are conserved. When one drinks honey, one cannot distinguish what sort of honey has been collected and from what sort of flower. But the palatable taste of the honey presupposes that the honey is not homogeneous, but it is a combination of different tastes. Another example of is that although different rivers ultimately mix with the river of the sea, this does not mean that individual identities of the rivers are thereby lost. Although the water of the Ganges and the water of the Yamuna mix with the water of the sea, the river Ganges and river Yamuna still continue to exist independently. The merging of different individual entities into Brahman at the time of dissolution involves the dissolution of different types of the bodies, but the living entity, all along with the different tastes, remain individually submerged in Brahman until another manifestation of the material world, as the salty taste of seawater and the sweet taste of the Ganga water are different, and this difference continuously exists, so that difference between the supreme Lord and the living entities continuously exists, even though at the time of dissolution they appear to merge. The conclusion is therefore that even when living entities become free from all contamination of material conditions and merge into spiritual kingdom, Their individual taste in relationship with the Supreme Lord continue to exist, the personified Vedas continue. So until now, we were just understanding this part that Brahman, in Brahman realization, different, this one, Atma merges with Paramatma, but the identity of Atma remains as it is. Atma does not get uh, although Atma gets merged with Paramatma, it does not get dissolved in Paramatma, right? The individual identity of Atma remains. And whenever there is creation, next time creation, uh, Atma is given another body and it can come down and exist. Yeah, the personified Vedas continue, dear Lord, and it is therefore our conclusion that all conditioned living entities are attracted by your material energy, and it is only due to their mistakenly identifying themselves as product of material nature that uh, that they are transmigrating from one body to another in forgetfulness of the eternal relationship with you. Because of ignorance, these living entities misidentify themselves in different species of life, and especially when elevated to the human form of life, they identify with a particular class of men, or particular nation, or race, or so-called religion, forgetting their real identity or eternal servants of your lordship. So here it is said that human forms, uh, when they get to this material body, uh, they would look. Vedas are glorifying Krishna, uh, but these who are deviated, they would be glorifying something else. Now, what is that something else? Uh, that is something that they identify themselves with, right? It can be their society, their group, their culture, their values, their uh, uh, state, their locality, state, city, or whatever, their nation, their continent, whatever, their caste, creed, whatever differentiates them, they would try to find their prestige from that. Now, this is another guna of Krishna, fame. They want fame of Krishna in whatever form they want to connect themselves with. Actually, we all have many diverse uh, attributes, right? So, someone might be a very good person at office. This is one attribute. He might not be a good father, second attribute. He might be a good husband, third attribute. Might not be working at home, fourth attribute. Might like to know about financial world, fifth attribute. Might not like to connect with social media, sixth attribute. So there could be many attributes to the same person, right? And these differences actually tell us who we are, and these differences appear because of our uh, past life and our association with material world in this life, right? Okay. So the personified Vedas continued, dear Lord, it is therefore our conclusion that all conditioned living entities are attracted by your material energy, and it is only that it is only due to their mistakenly identifying themselves as a product of the material nature that they are transmigrating from one body to another to in forgetfulness of their eternal relationship with you. Because of ignorance, these living entities misidentify themselves in different species of life, and especially when elevated to the life, human form of life. They identify with particular class of men, particular nation, particular race, so-called religion, forgetting their real identity as servants of your lordship. Due to his faulty conception of life, they are undergoing repeated birth and death. Out of many millions of them, if one becomes intelligent enough by associating with pure devotees, hmm, out of many million of them, if one becomes intelligent enough by associating with pure devotees, he comes to the understanding of Krishna consciousness and comes out of the jurisdiction of material conception. That in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is confirmed that Lord Chaitanya that confirmed by Lord Chaitanya that the living entity are wandering within this universe in different species of light, but that if one of them becomes intelligent enough by the mercy of the Supreme Master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, then he begins his devotional life in Krishna consciousness. It is said, Harim Vina Na Mritim Karanti. Without the help of Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot get out of the clutches of repeated birth and death. In other words, only the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, can relieve the conditioned soul from the cycle of repeated birth and death. The personified Vedas continued the influence of time, past, present, and future, and the material miseries such as excessive heat, excessive cold, birth, death, old age, and disease are all simply the movement of your eyebrows. Everything is working under your direction. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that all material activity is going on under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The Vedas continue. All the conditions of material existence are opposing elements from for persons who are not surrendered unto you. Hmm. But for those who are surrendered soul, this is what we have been saying again and again, again and again, again and again. Uh, this is very important. All the conditions All the conditions of material existence are opposing elements or persons who are not surrendered unto you. But for those who are surrendered soul and are in full Krishna consciousness, these things cannot be a source of fear. When Lord Narasimhadeva appeared, Prahlad Maharaj was never afraid of him, whereas his atheist father was immediately faced with death personified and was killed. Therefore, although Lord Narasimhadeva appears as death for an atheist like Hiranyakashipu, he is always kind to the reservoir of all pleasure for devotees like Prahlad. A pure devotee is not therefore afraid of birth, death, old age, and disease. Sripad Sridhara Swami has composed a very nice verse in this regard, the meaning of which is as follows. My dear Lord, I am a living entity, perpetually disturbed by the condition of material nature. I have been cracked to pieces by the smashing wheel of material nature, and because of my various sinful activities while existing in this material world, I am burning with the blazing fire of material reaction. Sometimes, somehow or other, my dear Lord, I have come to take shelter under your lotus feet. Please accept me and give me protection. Srila Narottam Das Thakur also prays like this. My dear Lord, O son of Nanda Maharaj, associated with the daughter of Vrishabhanu, I have come to take shelter uh, under your lotus feet after suffering greatly in the material condition of life. Now, this is very important. I would explain. And I pray that you please be merciful upon me. Please do not kick me away, for I have no other shelter than you. Ah, ah, ah. This prayer is really amazing. This prayer is complete crux of our life. Okay, so there are two parts to this. First, we must suffer greatly from the material condition of life. Look, it was our choice to come down in this material world. It was our choice to enjoy the opulence of Krishna, someone who has not suffered. Look, there are two very, very different things. One, we need to suffer. Second, we do not need to hate material world. We need to suffer. This is very important. Unless we suffer, we would not be doing bhakti. Unless we see that there is suffering in this world, why would we do bhakti? We would be comfortably placed in this world. So anyone who wants to go back home, back to Godhead, he need to suffer. There is an urgent need that you must suffer. Yeah. Unless you suffer, you do not understand why you should be doing bhakti. Yes. So first, Narottam Das Thakur says, uh, 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 first glorify Krishna, then talks about his relationship with Nand Maharaj, and talks about Radharani Maharani, and then he says that I have come to take shelter unto your lotus feet after suffering. I have already suffered. I have suffering greatly in this material condition of life. And thereafter, the second part. And I pray that you please be merciful upon me. Please do not kick me away, for I have no other shelter than you. This last few words, these words are very, 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 very important in our life. Unless we have any more shelter, we would not be taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of God. So, anyone who is doing bhakti, they already know that there is no shelter. But many of us fool ourselves. Yeah, I would take care of you. How can you take care of the other person? You are not even able to take care of yourself. Forget taking care of other person. How can you do that? But people fool out of this. The conclusion is that the process of self realization or God realization, other than bhakti yoga or devotional service, is extremely difficult. When it is written extremely difficult, you should read as impossible because it is difficult for those who are doing bhakti. I have not even started doing bhakti, so it is impossible for me. Taking shelter of the devotional service of the law of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness is therefore the only way to become freed from the contamination of material world, conditioned life, especially in this age. Those who are not in Krishna consciousness are simply wasting their time and they have no tangible proof of spiritual life. So that's the reason why we should be joining classes, doing Vaishnava association, chanting names of Krishna, else we are wasting our life. It is said by Lord Ramachandra, I always give confidence and security to anyone who surrenders unto me and decides definitely that he is my eternal servant and that this is my natural inclination. Similarly, Lord Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita, the influence of material nature is insurmountable. Yes, this is important. Insurmountable. What is insurmountable? Cannot be passed from. We cannot pass through that. Yes. So this um, comes from mountain. Suppose you are in a very, 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 very deep, we call it abyss, right? What is abyss? There's a very tall mountain in front of you. There's very, very tall mountain, and you could not even grab, like a lizard would be walking on the wall, right? So you need to have that kind of hand, that kind of fist to put your hand into rocks so that you can climb. You cannot even climb uh, the size of your body, right? You are not even able to climb that much, and there is 1,000 feet of rocks, and you need to climb that. It is insurmountable. You are not able to climb. This is very, very huge, right? So that is insurmountable. The influence of material nature is insurmountable, but anyone who surrenders unto me can very easily overcome the influence of material nature. The devotees, why this again? The devotees are at uh, not at all interested in arguing with the non-devotees to nullify their theories. Rather than wasting time, they always engage themselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness. Uh, so, look, uh, uh, I've often talked about this. You must be remembering. Uh, the problem is that with new devotees, we cannot directly say, but it is like that only. There is no argument. Sanatan philosophy is not that one of a discussion. The discussion is not allowed, I should say. People often misquote. People say that we have an open culture and we are open to debate. Actually, once you are saying that we have an open culture, that means that Guru and Shishya are at the same level. Open culture means more. I can question anyone, I can ask any question. You cannot. You can just surrender and inquisitively inquire. Once you question, you are the authority. You think yourself you are someone. You cannot do that. In Sanatan culture, it is not that philosophy. You cannot debate. Debate is within amongst equal, right? Someone who has a higher consciousness, someone who has a lower consciousness, how can debate happen? And no consciousness is same. No two consciousness is same. Someone is in Rajoguna, someone is in Tamoguna, someone is in Satoguna, someone has a very low qualities of Rajoguna, someone has a very high quality of Rajoguna. How can anyone debate? So debating culture is not there. It's funny that people say that we have an open culture and we can question. The word is question, not inquire, but question any beliefs. These are not the facts. These are just mental speculation. Okay, continue. Someone, if anyone wants, we can talk that at maybe 10 p.m. Okay. Rather than wasting time, they always engage themselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness. The personified Vedas continue, dear Lord, although great mystic yogis may have full control over the elephant of mind and hurricane of the senses, unless they surrender, unless they take shelter of the bona fide spiritual master, they fall victim to the material influence uh, and are never successful in their attempt of self-realization. Very simple. There is no if and but. The word used is never. Are you seeing this? The word used is Never. Is there a possibility? 1% chance? 0.1% chance? The word used is never. It is not possible. Such unguided persons are compared to the merchant going to ship on the going to sea on a ship without a captain. But attempts one's personal attempt, therefore, one cannot get freed from the clutches of material nature. One has to accept the bona fide spiritual master and work according to his direction. Th- Then it is possible to cross over the nescience of material condition. Sridhara Swami has composed a very nice verse in this connection, in which he says, Om, all merciful spiritual master, representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when my mind will be completely surrendered unto your lotus feet, at that time only by your mercy I shall be able to get relief from all obstacles of a spiritual life, and I shall be situated in a blissful life. Uh, I think we should be using this for this one, Facebook update. This is a very, very, very beautiful verse. Okay. Actually, aesthetic samadhi or absorption in the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be achieved by constant engagement of His service, and engagement of devotional service can be performed only when one works under the direction of bona fide spiritual master. The Vedas therefore instruct that in order to know the science of devotional service, one has to submit himself to the unto the bona fide spiritual master. The bona fide spiritual master is he who knows the science of devotional service in disciplic succession. The disciplic succession is called strotriya. The prime symptom of one who has become a spiritual master in the disciplic succession is that he is 100% fixed in bhakti yoga. Sometimes people neglect to accept a spiritual master and instead they endeavor for self-realization by mystic yoga practice. But there are many instances of failure even by great yogis such as Vishwamitra. Arjuna said in the comparison to the maddened elephant, without following the direction of the spiritual master, one cannot control control the mind and the senses. In other words, if one practices yoga mysticism and does not accept a bona fide spiritual master, he will surely fail. He will simply waste his valuable time. The Vedic injunction is that no one can have full knowledge without absolute truth, uh, without being guided under the guidance of Acharya. Acharyavan Purusho Veda. One who has accepted the Acharya knows what is what. The absolute truth cannot be understood by arguments. Look, this is what I was saying. Yes. One has attained One who has attained the perfect Brahmanical stage naturally becomes renounced. He does not strive for material gain because by spiritual knowledge he has come to the conclusion that in this world there is no insufficiency. Everything is sufficiently provided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A real Brahmana, therefore, does not endeavor for material perfection. Rather, he approaches the bona fide spiritual master to accept orders from him. A spiritual master's qualification is that he is Brahmanishtha, which means he has given up all other activities and has dedicated his life working only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. When a bona fide student approaches the bona fide spiritual master, he submissively prays to to the spiritual master, "My dear Lord, kindly accept me as your student and train me in such a way that I will be able to give up all other processes of self-realization and simply engage in Krishna consciousness devotional service." The devotee engaged by the direction of the spiritual master in the transcendental loving service of the Lord contemplates as follows: My dear Lord, you are the reservoir of pleasure. Since you are present, what is the use of the transient pleasure derived from society, friendship, and love? People unaware of supreme reservoir of pleasure falsely engage in deriving pleasure from sense gratification, but this is transient and illusionary. In other connection, Vidyapati, a great Vaishnava devotee and poet, says, My dear Lord, undoubtedly there is some pleasure in the midst of society, friendship, and love. Although it is materially conceived, but such pleasure cannot satisfy my heart, which is like um, uh, a desert. In a desert, there is a need of an ocean of water, but only if a drop of water is poured into the desert, what is the value of such a water? Similarly, our material hearts are full of multi desires which cannot be fulfilled by materialistic society, friendship, and love. When our heart begin to derive pleasure from the supreme reservoir of pleasure, then we can be satisfied. The transcendental satisfaction is possible only in devotional service of full Krishna consciousness. The personified Vedas continue, Dear Lord, you are Sachidananda Vigraha, this the ever blissful form of knowledge. And because the living entity are parts and parcel of your personality, their natural state of existence is to be fully conscious of you. In this material world, anyone who has developed such Krishna consciousness is no longer interested in materialistic way of life. A Krishna conscious being becomes uninterested in family life, where there is some concession for sense enjoyment. In other words, he is no longer interested in sense gratification. The perfection of human life is uh, based on knowledge and renunciation. But it is very difficult to attempt to reach the stage of knowledge and renunciation when while in family life. Krishna conscious person therefore takes shelter of the association of devotees or sanctified places of pilgrimage. Such persons are aware of the relationship between the supersoul and the living entities, and they are never in the bodily concept of life because they always carry you in full consciousness within their hearts. They are so purified that at any place they go uh, become a holy place of pilgrimage, and the water which washes their feet is able to deliver many sinful persons loitering within this material world. When Prahlad Maharaj was asked by his atheistic father to describe something very good which he has learned, he replied to his father, from the material for a materialistic person who is always full of anxiety due to being engaged in temporary and relative truth, the best course is that to give up. The best course is to give up the blind well of the family life and go to the forest to take shelter of the Supreme Lord. Those who are actually pure devotees are celebrated as Mahatma or great sages, personified personalities perfect in knowledge. They always think of Supreme Lord and His lotus feet, and thus they automatically become liberated. Devotees who are always situated in the position becomes electrified by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord, and thus they themselves become the source of liberation for their followers and devotees. A Krishna consciousness person is fully electrified spiritually, and therefore anyone who touches and takes shelter of such a pure devotee becomes similarly electrified with the spiritual potencies. Such devotees are never puffed up with material opulences. Generally, the material opulence of good are good percentage. Generally, material opulences are good percentage. Uh, Education, beauty, and riches. But although a devotee of the Lord may possess all four of these material opulence, he is never carried away by the pride of possessing such distinction. Great devotees of the Lord travel all over the world from one place to place of pilgrimage to another, and on their way they meet many conditioned souls and deliver them by their association and distribution of transcendental knowledge. They generally reside in places like Vrindavan, Mathura, Dwarka, Jagannath Puri, and Navadvip because only devotees assemble in such places. Association, devotee association. In this way, they give saintly association to one another and thus advance, so that every living entity can take advantage of the association of Krishna conscious person. Such great devotees open temples and ashram where Krishna's devotees assemble. By such association, people can develop more and more in Krishna consciousness. Such advancement is not possible in ordinary household life, which is devoid of Krishna consciousness. The personified Vedas continued, Dear Lord, there are two classes of transcendentalists, the impersonalist and the personalist. The opinion of the personalist is that material manifestation is false, and only the absolute truth is factual. The views of the personalist is there, however, that the material world, although very temporary, is nevertheless not false but factual. This is correct. Such transcendentalists have different arguments to establish the validity of their philosophy. Factually, the material world is simultaneously both truth and untruth. Okay, it is truth because everything is expansion of the supreme absolute truth, and it is untruth because the existence of the material world is temporary. Uh, it is created and it is annihilated because of the different conditions of the existence of the cosmic manifestation has no fixed position. Those who advocate acceptance of the material world are false, as false are generally known to be known by the maxim Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. They put forward the argument that everything in the material world is prepared from the matter. For example, there are many things made of clay, such as earthen pot, dishes, and bowls. After their annihilation, these things may be transformed into many other material objects, but in all cases, their existence as clay continues. An earthen water jug, be after being broken, may be transferred from bowl to dish, but either as a bowl, as a dish bowl, or a water jug, the earth itself continues to exist. Therefore, the form of water jug, bowl, or dish are false, but their existence as earth is real. This is impersonalist version. The cosmic manifestation is certainly produced from the absolute truth, but because its existence is temporary or false, it is false. The impersonalist